Good evening, everyone, and welcome to all of our guests. Thank you for joining today's webinar on human trafficking awareness and prevention. I'm delighted to see so many participants joining us for this crucial conversation, especially on today of National Human Trafficking Prevention Day. My name is Bridget Nevels, and I will serve as your host throughout the session. I also serve as the chair of program planning and development in the Dallas Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta. Today's webinar is not just an information sharing platform, it's a collective effort to raise awareness and empower each one of you to combat human trafficking. We have a robust agenda ahead that covers the nuances of human trafficking, understanding the risk factors, sharing real life examples, discuss prevention strategies, and much more. Your active participation is key to making this webinar truly impactful. Feel free to submit your questions using the Q&A feature, and let's engage in meaningful dialogue. Together, we can contribute to the world where human trafficking is not only understood, but actively prevented. Without further ado, let's delve into the crucial topic of human trafficking awareness and prevention. Thank you for being here, and let's make this webinar truly enlightening and inspiring for all. So now let's hear from our chapter president, Carla McGarry.
Greetings. Again, I am Carla McGarry, president of the Dallas Alumnae Chapter of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. On behalf of our chapter, I would like to welcome and thank you for joining us for our webinar presentation, Operation R.E.D, Rescue, Empower, Defend, that will focus on a very important subject, human trafficking. January is National Human Trafficking Prevention Month to raise awareness about human trafficking and to educate the public about how to identify and prevent this crime. Today, we celebrate the efforts of all individuals around the world to raise awareness about this important subject, human trafficking. I would like to thank our guest panelists, Tiffany Parker and Dr. Cheryl Hamilton, for extending your knowledge and experience in law enforcement and mental health and wellness as it relates to this subject. This seminar is for informational purposes only. Thank you again for joining us, and welcome to Operation R.E.D, Rescue, Empower, Defend Human Trafficking. Back to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam President. Now we will hear from Hashan Epps.
Good evening, everyone. Let's talk numbers. The Dallas-Fort Worth region accounts for 35% of the state's commercial sexual exploitation cases, even though we're only 26% of the state's entire population. Red alert, we have a crisis. Human trafficking is a horrible crime that's often misunderstood and rarely spoken of. But as concerned citizens, thank you for joining us tonight. You can help identify and combat this troubling issue in our community. Human trafficking is a crime of exploitation. It is the recruitment, harboring, transporting, or procurement of a person for labor or services for the purpose of involuntary servitude, slavery, or forced commercial sex acts. Simply put, it's forced, it's fraud, and it's coercion. Human trafficking awareness provides an essential foundation. Awareness and outreach efforts help lead to the detection of human trafficking rings. Tonight, we are here to educate and inform. Trafficking does not only affect women, as we all may believe. Victims of trafficking are all genders, ethnicities, ages, races, nationalities, religions, and sexual orientations. And then traffickers can be anyone. Traffickers can pose as friends, boyfriends, girlfriends, or even parents. I'm glad you joined us tonight. We hope it provides you with the necessary tools to recognize the indicators of human trafficking and learn how to respond appropriately. If you have questions, please drop them in the Q&A section. We will have a Q&A session with our speakers tonight. Thanks. Ms. Nevels, I will hand it over to you for introductions.
Thank you so much, Ms. Epps. And without further ado, let's delve into this social ill and this robust discussion. I introduce to you Tiffany Parker. Tiffany Parker is an author, a survivor leader, and subject matter expert on anti-human trafficking as well. Tiffany has built an outstanding career as a firefighter and emergency manager over the last decade. Tiffany has 6 degrees, including a dual master's degree from Arizona State University, and is currently a doctoral candidate in trauma psychology. Tiffany uses her background as a trafficking survivor and first responder to educate civilians and other first responders on the epidemic of human trafficking. Without further ado, we have Tiffany Parker.
Good evening. You guys can all hear me okay? Nod of the head? Yes? Alrighty. So I'd like to say that I have notes up and I'm going to read them and be, have a nice break between my words. Unfortunately, I'm a very candid speaker and I can't do that. So I got brought in a couple weeks ago. Somebody gave me a call and they had heard my presentation once before and they wanted to know if I would speak in this presentation. The presentation I've built for you guys is not one that I normally do. Mine's usually much longer, but I built it along the question. I was talking to the young lady, I told her my story, and her response was, well, I'm a little confused because how is a girl able to go to high school while she was being trafficked? I was like, I don't understand the question. Let's get it. What are you trying to say? And she said, well, I thought human trafficking was like that movie Taken. And that is what I hear so often isn't human trafficking that thing that's happening to those people over there? It happens to us when we're in the wrong country, but it's not really happening here. So when I heard that question, I hear it almost every time I talk all over the world. And that's always the number one is, well, it's not happening to my race. It's not happening to my sex. It's not happening in my town. It's not happening to my people. Isn't that the thing that's happening to somebody else? So that's what I built my presentation on today. And I really hope that you guys enjoy the thing I like talking about so much. So for us, we all know that slavery ended in 1860s. We abolished it, never to be seen or heard from again. But the truth is, we have more people in slavery today than we ever have at any point in time in history for as long as our world has survived. There are over 40 million people that are involved in human trafficking today, and that is modern day slavery. I'll kind of touch on some of the stuff they touched on previously. It is a $150 billion industry. It's the fastest growing criminal industry in the world, and it's happening to the people in your community. So what is human trafficking? She touched on it a little bit. Like I mentioned, it doesn't always look like the movie Taken. It doesn't always look like the movie The Sound of Freedom. Human trafficking is an act of 3 different things: action, means, and purpose. So our action is people that are recruiting, transporting, transferring, harboring, or even receiving people for different purposes. Those means are through threats, through coercion of those people, through abduction. So we saw that in Taken. Through fraud, we also saw that in The Sound of Freedom. Deception, abuse of power, and giving payments or benefits to people that can't legally take those payments and benefits. Those purposes are for a plethora of different things. We primarily hear about the purpose being sex, prostitution, but it also looks like forced labor or slavery, the removal of organs, or any other type of scenario that includes exploitation. So Krista Melton from the Office of the Texas Attorney General's Office said something that I couldn't have said it any better myself. So she quoted saying, "Human trafficking is a local crime that is happening in your neighborhood to your children. It's a crime happening in your city." And Krista had no idea how right she was. So my story, I have a very long background of human trafficking in my life. It started when I was very young. When I was 16 years old is the first really recorded human trafficking that I experienced, and that was being a child bride. So my mom had married a man when I was really young, someone that never really liked me, and he was always looking for a way to get me out of the house. At 13 years old, I was raped by a 27-year-old Navy SEAL. I was blamed for it. I was called a temptress. I was called a prostitute. I was a whore. All of these things because I had been raped, and I was led to believe those things. And that was just a way for him to solidify him wanting to get me out of the house. So he and the pastor of our church at the time got together, and they found me a husband, a grown man, and they sold me to this man to be his wife. And for 4 years, I tried to be his wife. The sexual abuse, the physical abuse, I did all the things that a trafficking survivor does to stay alive, to stay happy, to stay healthy. And finally, one day I said, screw it, I'm not doing it anymore. And I ran away. I ran away and I was homeless. And the sexual abuse got worse. Homeless people and children are number one on that list of people that are vulnerable to human trafficking. And that's what I was. I was vulnerable to human trafficking. So I got to the point where sex became something that I could give for minor conveniences. It's really cold where I come from in northern Arizona. I don't want to sleep in the snow. So guys would say, if you'll have sex with me, I'll let you sleep on the floor of my garage tonight. At least you'll have a safe place to stay. That is human trafficking. That is somebody else getting something of mine, my body, in exchange for something else. You can call it prostitution. You can call it what it is, but we all have to share the same background, prostitutes and human trafficking survivors, and that's a background of abuse. So the next time I was trafficked was by my own cousin. My cousin had a background of really liking boys, and I was a hindrance between her and boys because maybe I was a little bit cute or maybe I was a little bit skinnier. Whatever her reasoning is, she felt like I was a threat. So she worked with a drug dealer. They drugged me and she sold me to him, who continued to use me for days. I don't know if it was 2 days or 20 days because I was so doped up on drugs. All I can remember is waking up to feel somebody having sexual intercourse with me. That's what human trafficking looks like. I'm a white girl in northern Arizona with a well-off family. That doesn't happen, right? That happens to those little poor brown kids in another country. That's what I've had people tell me is, no. I'm in a white community. It doesn't happen to us. I'm an affluent Black woman. It doesn't happen to us. It happens in Honduras, in Mexico, in China. No, it's happening to us, and it's happening to our kids. So some of the typical recruiting for human trafficking is that relationship of trust. For me, it was my cousin. It was my dad. That trusting relationship. They isolate that victim, and then they use methodology to abuse their victims. A girl that I do a lot of presentations with, the girl that I travel all over the world with, she was a human trafficking victim in high school by her coach. That is somebody who built up a trust not with just her, but with the school and her community, and violated that trust by trafficking his students. Somebody had mentioned previously, human traffickers look like your neighbors. They look like your kids' coaches. They look like foster parents, neighbors, people in the school in your community. But number one, the most highest trafficker in the world are moms and dads, are people that we expect we can trust that are trafficking their children. 55% of human traffickers are parents. I'm getting close to my time. My 10 minutes is up, so I'm going to tell you one more thing. Nowadays, it doesn't have to look like taken. Human traffickers don't have to take people because we are offering our children up on something called social media. If you have children and they have a cell phone, they have access to a computer, they have a tablet, they have anything that connects to the internet, your children are currently, are currently talking to predators on the internet. And it is up to you, nobody else. It is up to you to educate your children on what human trafficking is and how they can be safe on the internet. There are 750,000 sexual predators online at any given moment. So it's no longer the coaches, it still is the coaches, it's still the parents, it still is. But every time your child logs onto that computer, they're logging into an opportunity to be trafficked and to be groomed. I will hand it back over to you, Bridget.
So, Ms. Parker, thank you for that. But now you do have a few more minutes if you wanted to extend your your discussion with us for a few more minutes.
Yep, sure, I would love to. So I was talking about social media. So technology is facilitating the evolution of human trafficking. Facebook, Snapchat, Minecraft. I have a young nephew, the cousin I mentioned previously, she has a son. That son was groomed on a video game, on a chat room, on a video game website. There is no social media app that is safe for your children. The Bible app, for those Christians in the room, you ever notice on your Bible app, it's got a chat feature. You know who's on that chat feature? Human traffickers. So there are any dating sites, any escorting sites, any apps that you think that your kids are safe on, those are the apps that human traffickers are on. The kids that are going to be most vulnerable to traffickers are transient living, so those kids that are runaways or homeless, any youth, so any boy or girl under the age of 18, unaccompanied minors. We hear a lot about that in the news right now, of unaccompanied minors coming over from other countries, landing in the United States, any child that's involved in the justice system. The most important to me, I think, are the foster care kids, because those foster care youth, those runaways, they're already deemed in our system as throwaway kids. So that the world has already thrown these kids away, and they're throwing them away right into the arms of traffickers, right into the arms of groomers. CPS involvement, truancy, gang involvement, and like mine, a history of physical or sexual abuse. Those people are vulnerable and they're looking for somebody that'll love them. And the people that they're finding to love them on all of these social media websites are traffickers, are groomers, are the people that are looking to victimize these kids. Now you may say, I'm in a very affluent community. I live in a $200 million home. My neighbors are all rich. Your kids are just as vulnerable as the kids that are living on the streets. We all have our different types of vulnerabilities. And I'll reiterate again, as the parents, you are the only ones that can stop your children from being trafficked, the only ones that can stop your kids from being groomed, and educate them on how dangerous everybody is. Not to trust anybody just because it's the coach or the pastor or the police chief. Everybody is a suspect until they're not. Okay. I am done this time, Bridget.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, Ms. Parker. I know for me, I had to take a couple of deep breaths just to digest everything that you were sharing with us. So, a couple of notes that I was able to lift from your discussion with us is that it's anyone, your neighbors, and the statistic that the number one traffickers are parents, and that there are 750,000 predators online, and the chat features and the different social media platforms. So we are going to continue now to the mental uh, impact and the wellness with Dr. Hamilton. But to our participants, please use the question and answer feature as we continue. Next, we have Dr. Cheryl Hamilton. And Dr. Hamilton is the owner of Hamilton Counseling and Consulting. She is a licensed professional counselor supervisor and registered play therapist. She holds a doctorate of education in community care and counseling, focusing on marriage and family therapy from Liberty University. Dr. Hamilton's expertise is finely honed and a particular focus on ADHD and play therapy, allowing her to employ a diverse skill set to cater to the unique needs of her clients. Dr. Hamilton, she generously imparts her knowledge through supervision and consultation, shaping the next generation of registered play therapists. Her commitment to delivering impactful presentations, such as the one tonight within her field, is contributing to the broader discourse on effective therapeutic practices. We turn it over now to Dr. Hamilton.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. I am just so delighted to definitely be talking about this situation, this actual crisis that we are experiencing right now in the United States. I love what our last presenter just talked about as far as people assuming that it's not in America, it's not in our neighborhood, it's not, local, it's not next door, when definitely it is. And we are in the midst of witnessing that right now on the news, where every day they have been doing sex trafficking and human trafficking busts, and they're really out there trying to capture and catch all of these people who are engaged in these activities. So I want to come to you tonight from a mental health perspective of just like the what human trafficking victims experience. I definitely want to talk about the trauma. As stated before, I work with children a lot, especially children that are in foster care. And so I have encountered a lot of my clients who have experienced some type of human trafficking, sexual abuse, especially some who have been shifted from different foster homes to foster homes. And right along with what the other presenter said, just being sold from their parent to these individuals who have made promises for these children to do sex acts. And so just want to kind of focus on that. The first thing that I want to talk about is just the trauma and trafficking. Usually survivors of human trafficking often endure severe trauma. It leads to long-term mental health consequences, such as post-traumatic stress disorder, which we call PTSD, and then anxiety and depression. Also, a lot of times they have been misdiagnosed, and I'm going to say misdiagnosed because usually their trauma, the experience of which they have went through, is so symbolizes some diagnosis such as bipolar or even schizophrenia. And so sometimes they're not treated for the trauma, they're treated for something that they should have never been diagnosed with. And so we definitely have a lot of barriers when it comes to that, identifying exactly what is the correct diagnosis when we're working with people who have, or individuals, survivors of human trafficking. I want to make sure I get the word right, because if they have been freed, then they are a survivor. Sometimes what we have found is that human traffickers definitely focus in on people who are most vulnerable. Those have been the ones who are easily exploited. And so what we're seeing right now is a trend, not only in our foster care system, but also with our within our LGBT community when it comes to children, those who have ran away from home, who have nowhere to go, who have no support system. Those are some of the individuals who they have really been focusing on exploiting the most. Also, individuals with pre-existing mental health challenges may be more vulnerable to exploitation as well. Some of the barriers that they face right now is the stigma surrounding mental health. Usually, especially within the African American community, people don't really believe in mental health. And so we're still fighting that battle. And then to add on this stigma of being trafficking, that, brings about another item of shame and discouragement. And so sometimes they choose not to discuss things in their mental health session, or they have to figure out that they can trust you and that it's a safe space. Sometimes mental health symptoms might be misinterpreted, like I said, and lead into a failure to recognize the signs of trafficking. So we could definitely be working with some of the victims or survivors in our midst and don't even know it because we have misdiagnosed them. But like I said earlier, we're definitely treating them for something different. And so those are two of the barriers that I wanted to focus on. And then just the access to mental health services. Usually traffickers are definitely trying to not put these individuals in places where they can get that type of support. And so individuals may not know that they can go somewhere where they can have some type of mental health support. And so many trafficking survivors face barriers, including lack of awareness, financial constraints, and fear of judgment. And so one of the things that we definitely have to do is be able to improve access to mental health support so that they can get the resources and the services they need. So just kind of moving on, one of the things that legislation has kind of done in the past couple of years is that they have tried to create advocacy policies that recognize the intersection of mental health and human trafficking. They see that it is a crucial need. And so instead of them focusing on just trying to capture the individuals who are doing the trafficking, they're actually trying to reach out to survivors to make sure that they get these mental health needs and the assistance that they need in other areas or other resources. So that has been a big push, not only in the federal legislation, but also in the state of Texas. We are really trying to figure out how we can implement a legal framework to ensure that survivors are not penalized for actions taken under the coercion of the traffickers. So, because sometimes survivors actually become the perpetrators as well, and I don't know if we have talked about that or not, but sometimes that's their job, that's their role, is to get other young children, other individuals to kind of do the same thing that's going on. So that's one of the things that we have been working on. Focusing on some coping skills. So if you know someone who definitely has encountered being a human trafficker, being trafficked, or has experienced any type of sex trafficking or any of that, then traffickers may exploit coping mechanisms related to mental health, such as the number one thing is substance abuse. So they will, engage with a lot of different drugs, alcohol, to manipulate the victims, So when we're focusing on coping mechanisms, well, we want to kind of talk to our children, as the last presenter was saying, that they're recruiting from social media, they're recruiting from the playground, they're recruiting from other places. We want to make sure that our children understand, the dangers of taking drugs or being around people who is willingly giving them those drugs, as well as any alcohol or anything that can alter their mind, and they can start being trafficking. And then also just talking more in the community about mental health symptoms, and talking about mental health awareness, and how to kind of look for the different signs when it comes to someone who may be exploited as well. When we're focusing on community support and rehabilitation, one of the things that we need to do, in which I think we're doing a good job of that tonight, is building supportive communities that understand and empathize with mental health challenges, in which they can create a protective environment against trafficking. And so it's like the more we know, the more we grow. So we definitely want to make sure that we keep doing these kind of things to educate people out there who may be unaware or who may be in disbelief that this happens right next door to them. We want to try to create some rehabilitation programs to incorporate mental health services to address the holistic needs of survivors, and then do some parent or psychoeducation awareness of individuals who may be taking in survivors who have experienced any type of trafficking as well. So because we are doing the R.E.D empowerment, I wanted to definitely do a R.E.D takeaway. So one of the first thing is to recognize vulnerabilities. Recognize the red flags of vulnerabilities associated with mental health challenges, and help others identify and understand the signs, and is the first step in preventing exploitation. And we want to focus on empowering through mental health education, empowering individuals with mental health education, like a R.E.D beacon guiding through the complexities of life, so any type of analogy or symbol, anything that we can symbolize to help people understand that education fosters resilience and equips communities to resist manipulation. And then the last thing is we want to defend against exploitation. Defend against exploitation by addressing mental health as a crucial aspect of anti-trafficking efforts. And then we would in turn strengthen mental health services and support system forms that will create a robust defense against traffickers. And so those are just some of the things that I wanted to highlight tonight. And so I want to give it back to you, Bridget.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hamilton, for that. I know for me, some of the key takeaways that I have, again, that caused me to take a couple of breaths. We are seeing that human trafficking is hiding in plain sight. It's hiding in plain sight, and just the need for resources for survivors, for the community to be able to really understand Operation R.E.D, being able to recognize the vulnerabilities. You mentioned empowerment and education, and just defending against such a social ill. So now I will turn it back over to Hashan Epps for the Q&A portion.
Thanks, Bridget, and thanks, Tiffany and Cheryl Hamilton, for your presentation. It's eye-opening. We are in the middle of a crisis, and us as concerned citizens, we need to be able to identify and help prevent human trafficking in our local communities. So that being said, just a reminder to our audience, and I see now we've crossed that 100 mark. So thank you for attending, everyone. Please drop your questions in the Q&A box as we continue our conversation. First question that I have, and Tiffany, I'm going to come over to you. How do we advocate or report the abuse for someone that we suspect to being trafficked, or in the midst of a trafficking situation?
That's a phenomenal question, and very rarely is somebody going to know they are being trafficked. I didn't know that the things that had happened to me were being trafficked for nearly a decade. So when somebody is in that life, they aren't going to know that they are being trafficked. So you have to get professionals involved. You have to get the right people to talk to them. So I'm going to stress something, and Dr. Hamilton can reiterate this, is a trafficking survivor will talk to one person one time. Don't let that one person be you. You aren't trained to do it. You don't know, and you're going to shut them down. You're going to close them out, and you're going to scare them away. As a trafficking survivor, I know this firsthand. Working with trafficking survivors, I know this. So you have a couple options. If you suspect somebody is being trafficked or being a victim of any type of abuse, there are professionals. For human trafficking, we have two options: the National Human Trafficking Hotline. So that number is 1-888-373-7888. You can call or text them anytime if you have questions. Just understand that you need to be prepared to share any details you have about the situation, such as the location, the individuals involved, and any relevant circumstances, and be prepared to provide information about your concerns. If you don't want to call the human trafficking hotline, you feel like it needs to be met with now, you can call your local law enforcement, but make sure that you ask for their human trafficking unit. If they don't have a human trafficking unit, ask for their vice or their crimes against children. They have some type of unit where there's somebody that specializes in human trafficking. I assume the majority of the people on this call are from Dallas. Dallas Police Department has an extensive human trafficking group. So if you call DPD and you tell them, I need somebody that deals with human trafficking, they are going to get you to the right person, somebody that is trained to talk to a survivor, to talk to a victim. So I implore you, do not try to intervene. Don't try to confront those involved. So I mentioned that my little nephew, my little cousin, whatever you want to call him, was groomed. His school found out about it. They called my uncle, and instead of reaching out to professionals, my uncle reached out to my little nephew, told him, I know what's going on. I heard all about it. And my nephew turned around and took that to his groomer. The moment the groomer found out that he'd been sold out, he disappeared on to go groom other people. So if you think that somebody is being trafficked, be wrong. If you think it's trafficking, call the people. If you're wrong, who cares? No harm, no foul. Maybe somebody gets offended, maybe they don't. But if you were right and you didn't say anything, that person's in for a life of hell. And as Dr. Hamilton mentioned, we can't get help as survivors until we know what the hell just happened to us. And for some of that's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. You could be the reason why a child gets help now. So call the human trafficking hotline anytime you have questions. I have people text me all the time. Tiffany, I just drove by this area. It looks really shady. I saw a pink neon light in the window. What does it mean? Who do I call? What do I say? Do that. Reach out to a professional. Ask us. We're happy to give you an answer, because we'd rather you make an anonymous tip, make a tip and be wrong, than never say anything and have been right the whole time.
Thank you for that, Tiffany. And I want to stay with you. I do have just a little bit more, as a concerned citizen, how can I tell the difference between someone that's experiencing domestic violence, abuse, or trafficking? Or if I see something, say something.
So you see something, you say something. So this does tie into my last answer. Human trafficking, domestic violence, child abuse are all going to look a lot alike, but there are some telltale signs that we have that they don't. One of the things that human trafficking involves is not making eye contact. When a trafficking victim, not a survivor, when a trafficking victim makes eye contact with somebody, they are essentially picking their next John. If you ever watch the movies, what does a prostitute do? She looks in the car and she makes eye contact with the guy. That's her saying, you're my next one. So they don't make eye contact. Sometimes you'll look down. I know in this generation it's a little harder, this era it's a little harder, but sometimes you'll see a little girl that's dressed like a little boy. haphazardly dressed like a little boy, or a little boy that's haphazardly dressed like a little girl. You may see somebody in the middle of winter. Think about the weather we're having right now. If you don't see a child that's in warm clothes and a fuzzy jacket, they're in ill-fitting clothes that look like they belong to their little sister or their big brother last summer, that's a telltale sign. Or vice versa. During summer, they got long sleeve shirts on. We ran with a little girl that had a little mini skirt on and a diaper. She was 7 years old. They just didn't have what they needed to dress her. So they put on whatever they can to get her where they need her to go. Some other signs are tattoos and branding. Normally in my presentations, I have a PowerPoint. We talk about what tattoos and brandings look like, but traffickers are arrogant, they're cocky, and they're very proud of what they're doing. So what do you do when you're arrogant and you're cocky and you're proud of what you're doing? You brand it. So these girls have tattoos, these boys have tattoos. They're in the shapes of butterflies, various types of triangles, forever hearts, barcodes. Some people just get bold enough to put their name right on them, but they're branded. I have tattoos all over my body. I love my tattoos. I love when people ask about them. And that's something that we always encourage people is ask about somebody's tattoo. If you see a butterfly tattoo, ask why they have that butterfly tattoo. If you see a crown tattoo, ask why they have a crown tattoo. They're going to be proud to tell you. It's when they start avoiding the question, evading the question, that you know, okay, something's wrong. Kids whose parents, now this goes both ways. I don't let my kids spend the night, but parents of kids who don't let them spend the night places, don't let them go places, are always right there. They're the ones that are asking the questions or, you know, giving the answers. If you work in the medical field, think about all of us right now. What do we have in our pocket or in our purse? We have our driver's license, we have our insurance card, we know where our social security card. Certain victims don't have those possessions. So if you work in the medical field and you ask for a driver's license and somebody else hands it out, that's a tail sign. So I could go on for signs for 2 hours straight, but those are some pretty good ones that you can look at right now are tattoos, branding, and how is that person behaving? Is it a socially normal behavior, or are they acting like the person that's standing near me is in charge and I am less than, I don't want to look at you. They'll give the answers, they'll do the information, and I'm here for whenever they're ready for me to speak.
Interesting. Thank you for that. And I'm going through our chat for the audience. Keep the questions coming. And Dr. Hamilton, anything you'd like to add on those two questions?
I did want to add also that in the state of Texas, we do have what is the Governor's Child Sex Trafficking Team. And so that's a specific initiative addressing child sex trafficking. So just kind of focusing on that. Or if you know of foster parents who don't want services. So in the state of Texas, all children who are in foster care, they should be getting some type of mental health services. And foster care parents are not supposed to deny those services for them. That's another sign, like just checking to see why they're denying those services. Sometimes they'll say, well, I don't think this child needs that, but it's really not up to them. So if you know somebody who is providing any type of care for children, and you see that maybe like Tiffany was suggesting, the dress attire is not appropriate, they're not combing their hair, they're not doing different things, and then you could tell that they're straight denying services for the child, that's another sign. We have ran into that several times. And so getting to know the foster care agencies in your area, and I know you may feel like, well, I don't want to be a foster care parent, but getting to know these foster care agencies really help out a lot, because you can help them vet foster parents by giving your input, because foster care agencies, that is a public service. And so that you have public information and access to these people who are providing care. That is also state funded money that is being used to take care of these children. And so that's something else that I wanted to add. Getting to know DFPS. Right now they're going through being corporate corporate owned. And so a lot of times the children, they get missed in a lot of things, or they get displaced. And so kind of just checking in with your local Department of Family Protective Service just to see, like, if you want to volunteer, like if they need help, what does that look like, so that these children won't get displaced. Sometimes last year and then the year before, children were sleeping in the offices at DFPS, and they were getting they were coming up missing. And so that's a huge problem. And I know that's something that we don't talk about on the news a lot, but that's one of the ways that this occurs. This is how they get to these people who can exploit them. So just focusing on that. And then the Texas courts, our local and state courts, they have all kind of information on different legal actions and resources available to victims of human trafficking as well.
Thank you for that, Dr. Hamilton. And I'll come back to you, Dr. Hamilton. You may be able to help us. I have educators on the call. How can the schools, or the school counselors, school teachers, administration, get involved to help the children understand human trafficking, how to avoid it, and then also help kind of, I guess, identify trafficking? Is there any programs available to the school or the educational system that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of programs in particular, but I do want to say, if they have a great PTA or a PTO who wants to take the lead, in that there are so many different community partnerships that schools can form in order to get the information and the resources. They can actually have a day of parent education where they can be out there educating. And just like when we were in school, we used to have Red Ribbon Week where they would talk about drugs. That's how we learned about drugs for, as a student on our level. They can educate us on that level as well. So whatever they can do within the means of the education system, I would say definitely do it and go out and encourage those things. School counselors have the ability to form those community partnerships. So partner with people in the community who are working with children. Not only are they working with children, people who know specifically about human trafficking. That would be the best way to get this information released. There is a project that I do know of, which is called the Polaris Project. And that is a nonprofit organization combating human trafficking, and they actually operate the National Human Trafficking Hotline. But once you go to their website, they have a lot of resources that is very valuable, that they could actually get that information and bring back to their school. I know they'll send brochures, they'll send pamphlets, there's videos that they could actually access, and I think they'll even send speakers to come and talk. So giving them a call as well.
Thank you for that.
Miss Epps, may I add on to that?
Sure.
And then also for the school counselors, when we talk about the Texas Comprehensive Guidance Counseling Model, then there are mandated guidance lessons as well that you can tap into, such as your trauma-informed care, your dating violence guidance lessons. And then, as I believe Ms. Parker mentioned, just partnering and connecting with your local law enforcement and having them come in to actually deliver a lesson or guidance to students and parents around this particular topic.
I'll also mention that we go in, we speak to the counselors, we speak to the students, and we speak to the parents. But somebody asked how these behaviors are described show up in children in schools, but they're misconstrued as bad behavior. And that's what we talk to them about, of what to look for. We don't have time to get into it in this conversation, but we do get into the nitty-gritty of what to look for in a child to see that something has changed, and finding out if that something is human trafficking. But there are several agencies like mine that do counselor trainings of counselors, clinicians, and schools.
Thank you for that. Okay, so we're at 6:51. Let's go into social media. So Tiffany, I'll start with you. in this age, right, of social media, what can we do, one, to help protect our young people, our children? And then I guess what are some signs that parents and children can kind of look for in this age of social media to just kind of help them to be aware on the prevention side of this?
Absolutely. So I'm going to kill two of those questions with one stone. The most common recruitment method is social media. So what can you do to keep your kids on safe on social media? First of all, your young kids, lock everything down. Lock down their YouTube. Make sure that they can't add people that they don't know on their Snapchat. Monitor their Facebook, but educate your kids. So all my kids have Snapchat, all the way from my 11-year-olds to my 18-year-olds. The difference is what my 11-year-old can do on her Snapchat versus my 18-year-old can do on his Snapchat are astronomically different. The one thing that neither of them do on Snapchat is share their location. On Snapchat, your location is shared all the way down to the bedroom that you are in. So someone can drive all the way to your house, look at that pin, and see exactly where you're at. Your children don't understand that. They don't understand that that person on their video game that's being chatty with them, that's being their friend, isn't their friend. So we teach our kids, nobody's going to buy you stuff for no reason. My nephew I mentioned was groomed on a video game. The guy started paying for skins for him on this video game. Real money for fake stuff on the internet. Nobody's going to do that for you unless you've known them for a really long time. 9 times out of 10, your parents won't even do it for you. No one's going to buy you stuff. If somebody is really interested in everything that you have to say, you've never met them before, you guys talk all the time on the internet, and they listen to you, they ask questions. When you say bad things about your parent, man, they are supportive. They are isolating that person. They are grooming them. They're getting ready, and they're going to eventually slip them into their area. So I teach my kids that if somebody's highly interested in you and y'all have never met before, that's a red flag. My daughter is groomed on Instagram. She is very lucky. She's heard my presentations before, and she knew that the fact that this boy said that he was in England and had no pictures of himself and started to feel real interested in her, she stopped and she said, "Mom, this doesn't feel right to me. Based on what you've told me, he should have pictures. He doesn't want to send me pictures. He says he's in another country." It was a known registered sex offender, a man in our community. It wasn't a little boy in another country, but he was grooming her, hoping that she wouldn't know these things. Shut down those chat rooms. If they're young enough, they don't need those chat rooms. They can text their friends on their cell phones. My older kids, I wasn't the coolest mom ever, but when they had conversations on the video games, they were on speakerphone. As much as I was so annoyed by listening to their conversations, thank the Lord that I was listening to their conversations, because I was able to say, "Hey, that doesn't sound right. No, I don't want you going into a private chat room with that guy." So there are things that you can teach your kids, but have conversations. And at the end of the day, remember, I have a 6-year-old. She shares the same story with me 800 times. I can tell her stories better than she can. But if I'm not listening to her stories, somebody else is. Be the person that's listening to your kids' stories. I don't care if it's annoying or if it's this. Just remember, if you're not listening to your kids' stories, somebody else is. If you're not doing those things for your kids, somebody else is. If you are not meeting a need, somebody else is. And teach your kids that. If I'm not meeting one of your needs, tell me, because somebody else is going to find out online and they're going to start exploiting those needs. The last thing I'll say about that, and it's not really social media, but Texas isn't the highest for trafficking because the age of consent is 17. Texas is highest for trafficking because, same with California and Florida, are our 2 neighbors on the top 3 for human trafficking. It's because of our waterways, our airways, and our freeways. So we have very quick ways that you can get in and out of Texas. We have very quick ways you can get in and out of California. We have very quick ways that you can get in and out of Florida. So I wish I could say, yes, the legal age of consent is why people are being trafficked, but that's not it. the legal age of consent has nothing to do with trafficking. It is how accessible that we are making people, how accessible we're making trafficking, and how accessible we're making our kids. We throw our kids online, we get tired of them, we sit them in front of YouTube, they're on social media, and all someone needs to do is fly in, jump on a boat, go. That's why Houston is number one. They're right there on the ocean. Jump on the freeway, pick your kid up, and you're never going to see him again.
Thank you for that, Tiffany. Eye-opening. And sounds like we have some to-dos tonight with our kids. Have some conversations and check settings on devices within the homes. Definitely. Let's see. Anything to add, Dr. Hamilton, before we go on to our next question?
I just want to piggyback on what Tiffany just said, especially like just being involved with your children. The more you know about their friends, the groups that they hang around, even as they get older, those teen years. I have children who catch Ubers and Lyfts. And that's definitely very dangerous. And I understand that sometimes that's the only means of transportation. But the more support that you can build for your child where they don't have to get into these vehicles alone, that is definitely most key. Or always knowing exactly where they are, teaching them to make sure that they share their location with you if that's the case. I do understand that there are single parents, and so sometimes they don't have a reliable way home. But even down to ordering food, I I have a lot of children who know how to order Uber Eats and do DoorDash, and talking to them about always having a consenting adult there to monitor that, because you never know if your child, especially as a latchkey kid, and someone is bringing food and they start picking up on, oh, this child is always here. Are they a part of a team who is trafficking? So just making sure with all of these conveniences that we have, they were created to assist, but then they in actuality harm us sometimes. And so making sure that you have the right support around your child and knowing as much as possible as you can to help prevent this from happening to you and your child.
Thank you for that. I'll go back to our Q&A box. And Tiffany, you may be helping with this one. What's the most common recruitment method within human trafficking? Is there one?
The most common would be social media.
Okay.
It was, once you think about Elizabeth Smart or some of the other cases where kids are snatched out of windows off of streets, how dangerous that would be. Now we've got cameras, we've got this, we've got that. Traffickers don't need to do that anymore when the kid will go right out to them. They just talk to them long enough on the internet and that kid will go meet them wherever they want. So the most common is going to be your social media.
Okay. Thank you. And then let's see, time check. We're almost at the top of the hour. So we do have just a couple more minutes. I'll do one more question. Let's talk a little bit about the survivors. And Dr. Hamilton, I'm going to start with you. How can we as a community support survivors in this human trafficking space?
So that was one of the things that I definitely focused on earlier, is just building those supportive communities, going out and making sure that community partners work together, and that we are knowledgeable about the services that we're providing. And then I do a lot of volunteering in the schools to, assist with my services. But sometimes parents, they just don't know, they are not aware of human trafficking. They're not aware of these things. So making sure that the word gets out. So even in my office, like I had flyers today about this webinar, because I thought it was important for them to be able to listen to those things. So just educating, it's that good old reach one, teach one. And so just continuing to do that, I think that helps build that community support and network that we need.
Thanks, Dr. Hamilton. And Tiffany, I'll come over to you. How can we support survivors and your organization that you have?
Absolutely. So a lot like Dr. Hamilton mentioned, and the reason why myself and other survivors are going and getting our doctorate is trauma counseling is something that is new to the counseling world and something that hasn't always been able for us to attend. My mom is a human trafficking survivor as well. She's 55 years old and she's never truly gotten the help she needs in all of the years of counseling she's gone to. She never went to a trauma counselor. So people that are interested in going and becoming counselors, look at doing trauma counseling. The way that you can support survivors is listening, understanding, trauma-informed care, but understanding that we are a unique subgroup of people. We all have our challenges, everybody in this world does, but human trafficking survivors have a unique level of chronic trauma that not everybody else has experienced, and the patience that you need to give those chronic trauma survivors. How you can help my organization is we are all trauma survivors. We are all sex trafficking survivor leaders. What that means is we've all been trafficked and now we are using that trafficking to educate other people. So you can support us by supporting our survivor leader retreats. So several times a year, 3 times a year, we find survivor leaders from all over the country that are doing stuff similar to me, presenting, educating, doing work with human trafficking survivors, and we send them on a retreat. We have a couple different locations. While they're there, they are pampered. They have mental health care. They do trauma-focused care. They get goodies. They get massages, but they get all of those needs that they need taken care of to get refreshed, to get their mental health back in check, and then send them back in the world to continue combating this. So if you want to be a sponsor, you want to sponsor a survivor to go to one of these retreats, you want to donate, or even if you are somebody that makes goods, we've had purses sent to these retreats, but stuff that we can give these girls that show that people appreciate. I can't believe I made it through this whole presentation. Now I'm going to cry at the end. But people appreciate the work that we do. So 1% of trafficking victims become survivors. 1% of that 1% live to tell their story, and by live to tell their story, I mean are willing to share their story. I work with trafficking survivors all the time, and they don't want to share their story either. They're embarrassed, the shame, the guilt, whatever it is that they're feeling, they won't share their story. So those of us that are willing to share our story by donating to our causes, calling us up to be part of a panel or come teach at your school, come teach at your organization, you're showing us that, I can't believe I'm crying at the end, that what we went through wasn't in vain, and that what we experienced, that we are helping other people not experiencing that by supporting us. I'm done.
Thank you, Tiffany, and thank you, Dr. Hamilton. So it's 7:04. So I'm going to hand it back over to Bridget.
Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Epps, Tiffany Parker, and Dr. Hamilton. You all have been a blessing tonight. I know, especially for me, I can say once we actually researched this topic and we developed the series of Operation R.E.D, Rescue, Empower, and Defend, we knew that this was a topic that needed to be shared, especially to heighten the awareness on National Human Trafficking Prevention Day. And so we also we'll do a whole campaign around this. And so tonight, Deltas Wear Blue, and we do want to highlight this topic and thank you for sharing your stories and your expertise. And to the guests, we want to thank you for being active participants in this eye-opening webinar related to human trafficking prevention. Together, we are happy to learn about the complexities of this issue and to delve into the various prevention strategies and to learn more about ways to support those in need. So remember, Knowledge is a powerful tool to be able to fight against human trafficking. We know that there are legislative needs. We know that there are mental health needs. We know that there are academic needs. There are educational needs. And I am delighted to say that our chapter, we are um, really passionate about bringing this topic to the forefront in our community. So, as we come to a close, I would just like for us to be mindful about the power of one that Tiffany Parker that she mentioned, being able to save one person, being able to offer one person a way to identify human trafficking that's hiding in plain sight. Then we hope that we have done our job tonight. But going forward, please visit our social media platforms, Dallas Alumnae Chapter's social media platforms, and our website. We do have some upcoming activities, such as our self defense class. We also have a teen mental health summit that's also coming up this month as well. And we have other various activities. And then, of course, we do have some activities, projects that will happen Saturday. So, again, thank you once. Thank you for joining us. And we hope that we have strengthened your commitment to helping us highlight and bring awareness to end human trafficking. Thank you and have a good night.